Hey guys, welcome. Let's look at two Packrafts by Decathlon. These are light enough that you can stuff them in a backpack and either replace parts of your hike with the rafting, or you do a loop by hiking up the river and then paddling downriver. And that is such a great way to spice up your hikes or camping trips or to rediscover places, because I've actually been doing a lot of exploration this summer on rivers and streams that are pretty close to my house and discovered cool spots that I didn't even know existed. So I am glad that Decathlon launched these, because pack rafting is traditionally not a hobby with a lot of budget-friendly options. There are a lot of amazing pack rafts on the market both in the States and here in Europe, but they typically retail for more than 750 euros or dollars, and so that's quite the barrier for entry. They're expensive because you need high quality materials that are both lightweight and can stand up to a fair amount of abuse, but it's also just a pretty niche market with low production volumes. Even for Decathlon, this is clearly not a high volume item because they don't seem to carry them in stores most of the time, at least not in Belgium. But enough intro, are they any good? Well, given the price, they're actually pretty impressive. There's a lot of trade-offs in designing a pack raft. There's no one raft that's gonna suit everyone, and so of course Decathlon has had to make some choices with these two. And I think for the smaller Itiwit 100, those are pretty straightforward. They've made a bare bones pack raft without any bells and whistles, but cut from the same cloth as the expensive competition. In the Itiwit 500, Decathlon did make some interesting choices. It's considerably more expensive than the 100, in part because they've added a couple of higher end extras, and whether it's right for you will depend on whether you like those particular extras, because it's perfectly possible that they're just not what you personally need. I would say that the ideal customer for the 100 is someone who just wants something to take on vacation, play with the kids, do some short relaxed trips in nice weather on flat or slow moving water, and just wants to have a good time on the water without covering great distances, but does want something that has real pack raft bona fides in terms of materials. Do not confuse this with these 20 euro Intex Explorer boats that you see everywhere. The bottom is made from 420 denier polyamide TPU, 210 denier for the side tubes, and those are perfectly fine numbers. You often see 840D for the bottom in more expensive pack rafts, but that also means that they're heavier, so it's a trade-off. And for this particular product, I think Decathlon made the logical choice. This is not a whitewater raft anyway, so chances are you're not gonna be encountering sharp stones and rocks. It is not the fastest, but I can't say that I've noticed that too much. It wasn't until we did a longer 16-kilometer, 10-mile trip and we switched rafts a couple of times during that trip that I really started noticing the speed difference. So yeah, it's slower, but it's mostly an issue if your friends have faster boats. The advantages of the Itiwit 100's design is that it's very comfortable. You're seated noticeably higher than in the classic alpaca raft that we took along on one of our trips. It's easy to maneuver, it's very stable, very reassuring as a beginner. There's not a lot of space to put things, but you have a couple of handles to tie things to, and the included pump bag doubles as a dry bag. So you really just have about everything you need inside the box, with the exception of a paddle and a personal flotation device. I bought a couple of those from Decathlon as well, by the way, so I might do a quick review later talking about your options if you decide to go for Decathlon paddles and life vests as well.
Is that normal?
In short, I feel that the Itiwit 100 is a great little pack raft. Not many alternatives on the market that offer this kind of sturdiness, stability, and comfort for under 300 euros.
Ja, die klein kan me wel overkoren, moet ik zeggen.
I'll add to that, having used them both, that there are not a ton of situations where you would have a great time with the 500 and not with the 100. And there is also a considerable weight difference, with the 100 coming in at a little over 2 kilograms, including the pump sack. So that all sounds pretty solid, right? Why then would you even consider a more expensive raft like the 500? Because the price difference is considerable. Well, I've already mentioned speed. The Itiwit 500 is longer and more narrow, which makes it better suited for tall people as well as faster, on par with a classic alpaca raft. Now, pack rafts are never going to be as fast as dedicated kayaks or canoes, but they can get to places where you otherwise can't. And of course, the great outdoors aren't really about speed as much as about getting away from speed limits altogether. Another reason to go for the 500 is storage. It has both a half deck in the front that has plenty of space to strap things onto, and it has a TiZip for in-hull storage, meaning you can just stuff your backpack or whatever you don't need inside the raft before inflating it, and it'll stay nice and dry. And that is a premium feature that most manufacturers charge 120 to 150 euros or dollars for. So to get it in a 550 euro pack raft is definitely a good deal. However, a cargo zip like this is always going to be a potential weak point, as most manufacturers will readily admit. You need to be careful not to get dirt caught in the zipper. You need to lubricate it from time to time. You don't want to fold it too tightly, so it does require care, as Decathlon points out in their website. They even made a separate video about it. Definitely worth a watch if you are thinking about getting the 500. Last reason to go for the 500 is the included knee straps. They look a bit like backpack straps, but they're intended to fasten your knees to the boat, which helps with control and can add power to your strokes. They're mostly used for whitewater rafting, and so if you take everything together, the half deck, the TiZip, and the knee straps, you get an idea of the kind of customer that Decathlon envisions for the Itiwit 500. Someone doing whitewater rafting, especially with a bike strapped to the pack raft, because that half deck is quite well suited for bike rafting. It's right there in their promotional images, and honestly, it does look like an amazing experience, even if it would make me anxious to expose my bike to the elements like that. Now, I don't want to knock the choices that Decathlon's made in designing these, but I do want to point out that before you buy one, you may want to think about where you want to use them, because I feel the Itiwit 500 is sort of a south of France kind of pack raft, aimed at whitewater rafting in warm temperatures, and you may not be so lucky as to live in the south of France. Here in Belgium, for example, especially in the Ardennes, where most of our scenic spots or the most scenic spots are, the water level of most rivers will not be high enough to pack raft on in summer. And though there are plenty of sunny days in spring and autumn, chances are that the water will often be too cold for comfort. There's different ways to counter that cold. There are wetsuits. They're not necessarily very comfortable. There are dry suits, but those often cost as much as the pack raft itself. One of the most common solutions is a spray deck, which keeps the water out of your boat and keeps you dry and warm. And here's the rub. You can't just retrofit a spray deck onto a pack raft like the 500. It needs to be part of the design, and it's just not here. So that, in my mind, is the big consideration here. Given where you are in the world, given where you plan to travel, is it going to be warm enough with high enough water levels to get the most out of this great little raft? That is a question I was left with, and honestly, if there were some kind of spray deck option, I would definitely have sprung for it, just because it adds so much year-round usefulness to a pack raft. And that is really my main issue with the 500. There's a couple of other smaller ones. I would perhaps have liked the bottom fabric to extend a little further to the sides, because the bottom is double the thickness. And of course, sharp stones or other objects aren't necessarily gonna touch only the bottom. I'm not a product engineer. They may have their reasons, but extending it a bit further seems like a smart thing to do. I'm also not a huge fan of the one-way inflation valve on these rafts. I think it's the same one that Decathlon uses on some of their tents, and the part that makes it one-way, I don't really know the proper term, came loose on both rafts. I found the one in the 500 thanks to the TiZip, but the other is still MIA inside the 100's hull somewhere. You can get by without a one-way valve, of course, but I found that the handling of the rafts is at its best when they're inflated pretty hard, up to the 1 psi limit that is printed next to the valve. And a last potential downside that I'm just passing on because I've heard it mentioned online is that the carabiners on the thigh straps are the non-locking variety, which might pose a safety risk if you're in whitewater and you get stuck. Might seem a bit far-fetched, but some experienced rafters are very adamant about this being a bad idea, so I thought I'd just mention it. Replacing them seems like an easy enough fix. That is pretty much all that I can tell you about these rafts based on our experiences.
Boom!
If you have a Decathlon nearby, I would recommend renting if you think this might be something for you. They are 20 euros a day, paddle included, which is about half the going rate for Packraft, so a solid deal and a great way to discover if this is a hobby for you. If you've got any extra questions, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.